Very warm welcome to this interview and panel, Who Runs the Show?, in which we'll be discussing the principle of show running and the position of showrunner in Europe. This event will consist of an interview with Jeppe Gjervig Gram, who is here with me. And after the interview, we have a panel in which we will be joined by screenwriters and showrunner Sanne Nuyens from Belgium and Pieter Bart Korhuis from the Netherlands. This interview and panel are part of the European Showrunner Think Tank, which is a series of industry talks that discusses the challenges and opportunities of the showrunner position in Europe. The European Showrunner Think Tank, on its turn, is part of the European Showrunner Programme, which is funded by the Creative Europe Media Programme of the European Union, the Film and Media Fund, NRW in Germany, and Netflix. So, as I mentioned, I'm here with screenwriter and showrunner from Denmark, Jeppe Gjervig Gram, who is writer to the hit show Borgen, is creator, screenwriter, and showrunner to another hit show that is known outside of Denmark under the title Follow the Money. And you are head of the European Showrunner Programme at EFS International Film School in Cologne. So welcome, Jeppe.
Thank you so much.
Jeppe, I would like to start off asking you, could you briefly describe your career path? How did you ended up writing for television and being a showrunner?
Well, yes, I'll try to do it briefly. I started out, as so many writers, wanting to be a director and wanting to do feature films. And at the same time, I worked at the Danish TV station TV2, and I got a job in, I think, 1999 in acquisitions, buying foreign TV series. And that was a very important moment with all the American fantastic TV shows coming out of both network and cable. It was the year where HBO started, and it was the year of West Wing and so on. And I fell in love with TV series, and I realized that it was mainly writers that were creating the TV series. So I changed course and knew that I needed to get into film school in screenwriting. And at the Danish Film School at that time.
So you went to film school with the idea of being a TV writer?
Yes, and I think I was the first one in Denmark to do that. When I came in, I think we only accept 6 pupils every second year, actually, and the 5 others thought I was a little bit crazy. I think that I wanted to do TV series. But a lot changed within those 2 years. Within those 2 years, between 2005, 2007, suddenly when the other left the school, they also wanted to do TV as well. I think I was the only one who basically just wanted to do TV. And then I was lucky to get hired by Svend Clausen and Ingolf Gabold, who was the grand old man of DR, the main public service broadcaster in Denmark, who hired me and my writing partner, Tobias Lindholm, to be episode writers on a TV series called Summer, where we were for about a year. And then we were approached by Adam Prise, who was the head writer of Borgen, and asked if we wanted to develop a show about politics with him. And we couldn't refuse that chance, even though we actually wanted at that time to have our own show. I think we were too young, looking back. but then we united with him, and we created Borgen. And then after Borgen, I had the chance to create my own show, Follow the Money.
We touch upon that a bit later. Yeah, but this interview and panel is about show running, but just to have the record straight, what is show running? What does the position of a showrunner entail?
Well, it's a funny word, and I know there are many people with many that looks different and have different opinions about it. But basically, it's the person who runs the show. It's and the Americans say show about TV series, and it's basically, even though it's not a job title, no one in the US, nobody in Denmark nobody everywhere, I think, has a job contract where it's a showrunner, but it's a description of the facts. It is working on a TV series. You always know whether it's a director, it's a producer, or it's a writer who is in charge. And the showrunner model is generally talking about creative showrunners, not certain places in Europe. It's producers, non-writing, non-directing producers that are in charge of the show. I don't think that's ideal. We will talk about that, but it's the person who takes all the creative decisions, or in the end is responsible for all the creative decisions, because of course a lot of creative people work together to make a TV series, and they take decisions all the time, obviously. But whenever there's some doubt, people will know who is the nexus to go to, and that will be the showrunner.
And the showrunner module is highly established, has been for decades in the US. I can imagine that the Danish model is slightly different. Could you talk about that? How did it come about, and what makes it different from the US
Absolutely.
model?
I think the Danish showrunner model is probably the first showrunner model at work in Europe. It's been like that, at least at DR, for 25 years. It came about in the 90s at DR. It was a very old-fashioned they had a very old-fashioned way of doing TV drama. It was called actually TV theater. It was not as bad as that. It sounds very, very old school, but it was not film theater. But they had a very old department with a lot of people who were on contracts, on more or less lifelong contracts, the directors, writers, and so on. And they had a certain way of doing it. And at some points they did a show which was a big flop, called in Danish Gyngehøvdingen. It didn't travel, so I don't think there's an English title. It crashed and burned, and it was supposed to be it was quite expensive, or very expensive, I think. It was a historical show, historical action drama show about a sort of like a Robin Hood kind of character, but true character in the 1700s in Denmark, and it ended up being a comedy, but it wasn't intended to be. But people were laughing, and it was afterwards. It's been popular with kids since, I think, but it's really weird. It doesn't work, and they realized that they spent a lot of public money on something that was ridiculed and didn't work, and they decided to completely reinvent the department and start what has since been DR drama. And they sent some key people to the US to visit the shows of Bochco and Milch, NYPD Blue. And there, I mean, that was writers and directors and producers going there, the writers seeing how they worked with writers' rooms and so on, the directors going on set and see how they work with two camera systems, and they came back and they made a Danish version of the American TV series production model, which has since been labeled the One Vision model from Denmark. And it's a much smaller version. It's smaller rooms. It's, I mean, we still use them. We go for high production value in the TV series, so it's not cheap shows, but it's still much cheaper than the American model.
Because it's mostly public money, I understand.
At DI, it's mostly public money, or it's all public money. But now, since the model worked so well, now everybody in Denmark is basically working within this model. Not as courageously as DR works with it, or used to work. I'm not quite sure how they're doing it the last few years at DR. Much has changed, I think. But because it was so immensely successful in those years, even before The Killing and Borgen and so on, there were a number of shows that were huge national hits in Denmark. And we're talking about, for instance, a TV series like Krøniken in the early 2000s, which had, I think they had a viewership of Sunday night, super prime time, 2 million viewers, and it was out of a population of 5.5 million people. So that was a major hit, unlike anything anybody has seen in Denmark, I think, since, though. But maybe the final episode of The Killing. But it was such a success, and that was before it really broke international as well.
Shows perform so well, local, and also globally, and remakes are made, and
I think, I mean, there's a lot of, that's speculation, obviously, but I will try. I think one part of it, yeah, maybe I should talk a little bit about the model, because it'll lead us to that. Because the model is, when they did the model, a few years after they started working with that model and finding out how should the Danish model be, there was a new head of drama called Ingolf Gabold, and he decided to, he's an academic type, and he decided to formulate the principles, basically, we were working from.
Do you mean there's an academic guidebook on the Danish model?
No. It was like an internal document, and it's very, very briefly. It exists. It's possible to find it. But he wrote down, I think, 15 principles. It later became 10, but I'm not going to go through all of them. But it was quite interesting. A few of them are worth mentioning. The first principle, he called them dogmas because it was just out after Dogma 95, and that was very much in vogue. So he wanted the dogmas of DR as well. And the first principle is the dogma of the one vision, and it's basically, it says if a TV series if you want a TV series to be a strong work of art, like a book or like a film or whatever, you need to have speak with one voice. It cannot be made like a total democracy or with a lot of people meddling. There will be a lot of people working on it, but in the end, it has to have one clear tone, not to become bland. And that's the dogma of the one vision. So that is needed for a TV series. And then this dogma number two is who owns this vision. And at DR, they made the dogma of writer is king, which I obviously like as a writer. But it was from the calculation that if the director were to carry the one vision on a long-running TV series, it's different with miniseries and limited series. But on a long-running TV series that has multiple seasons and so on, it's very difficult for a director to be in charge all the way, both be in the writer's room and controlling the writer's room, as well as being on set and directing episodes and so on. So the calculation they did was that if the writer's the boss, then the writer controls the writer's room and will talk to the directors, but will be in charge in the writer's room, and then will also, hire directors and be in creative control outside of the room. Exactly like it's done mostly in Hollywood, and then there's another dogma I want to mention, just because I think it's amazing. Because remember, this was written down by the head of drama, and he made a dogma for himself. He made a dogma for the head of drama. He says this dogma says the head of drama will be in charge of the TV series, but he will not be in control of the TV series, meaning that he himself, the head of drama, will not meddle too much with that TV series, because if he meddles, he will disturb the one vision. And to get that clear voice, if he starts micromanaging a TV series that is on his table, he will probably disturb the one vision. So he made that principle. Of course,
this head of drama's dogma means that he or she needs to trust the writers.
Exactly. It's about trust. And I think, coming back to your question, I think that's one of the secret ingredients is the trust. And I know it's incredibly difficult and must be very, very scary for executives to give that trust to creatives. But I think it's the only way to make really, really interesting TV series. And I think with a market today where there's so many TV series and you can easily be drowned out if you do something generic, I think it's actually the only way to do TV. But of course, it takes a lot of courage and it's risky. But looking at DR, it worked incredibly well. I think few people know that in the heyday of the Danish TV series wave 10 years ago or so, all the TV series that was seen abroad were from DR, and it was people often came to me and asked, well, what are the other TV series that are less good than Borgen and The Killing and so on? And I had to say there are none. We don't produce. We only do 10 episodes of Borgen, one in the spring, and then 10 episodes of The Killing in the autumn. And then the next year it's the same. And at some point we stop The Killing, and another show will take over. But it's 20 hours of primetime TV that DR produced in those years, where it really got such an international success. So the model, at least at that time, worked with a 100% ratio. But it's not, I mean, I'm not saying that it will work always, and DR has since or before made shows that were less spectacular, but it's quite some time ago since DR has made a flop, I would say.
Yeah, but you already mentioned that after Borgen you had the chance to create your own show, which is Follow the Money. Could you talk us through the process? How did the idea start? Because it's a show that deals with corporate crime and financial, malfeasance. Can you talk about where the idea came from and also how you took these dogmas in practice for this show?
Sure. It was born out, we were doing Borgen at the time when the financial crisis hit and Bear Stearns crashed in New York and you could feel it around the world. And I thought really, I felt we were so brave doing a show about politics at that time, boring Danish coalition politics. And then suddenly I thought, oh, wow, we're going to be, now the next big thing will be finance. People will take this supposedly boring subject and make it really relevant, because at that time and nowadays everybody was talking about finance and everybody was feeling the impact of the financial crisis. But while doing Borgen, nothing happened. I heard about one show, 2 shows, 17 shows being in development, but none of them were made at the time. And then when I finished Borgen, I decided, well, then I'll try. And I think also it was maybe a little bit, we made that show about boring Danish coalition politics work. I'm sure I can do the same thing with finance, big finance, which was maybe a little bit of a hybrid because it was more difficult, I would say. But the reason I could do it was that there was so much trust at DR, that they recognized that they really wanted to just said, go. And that was the same tradition of trust. But then, I mean, having that level of trust thrust upon you when you, I mean, I was a co-creator and episode writer of Borgen, and in the 3rd season, I would say I was also in sort of like the showrunner lieutenant to Adam. But having that power, wearing the crown of the showrunner on my own show, it turned out to be much different, a much different experience, and it was a very steep learning curve how actually to manage that job, because it's not easy, and so it's, I mean, it's in that sense it's a double-edged sword that you because being given that power without having been a showrunner before is something.
Well, talking about that learning curve, I'd like to talk about the European Showrunner program, to which you are head of. What is this program? What does it teach?
Well, basically, it tries to teach showrunning. But to be fair, I don't think you can teach showrunning, but you can. I think in my head yesterday when I tried to formulate the answer, you can probably compare it to taking a driver's license, which I'm now doing. 47 years old, very Danish. Taking the driver license courses doesn't really make you a driver, but it prevents you from crashing when you ride on your own. And then you have to drive, and at some point you will be a good driver. And I think it's a little bit the same with this. We teach people, the participants, a lot of skills that they will need. They will discuss among themselves. There's also a huge co-learning situation, also where we, the mentors or experts, learn a lot from the students by talking about experiences, and that will prepare them, hopefully, to become showrunners.
And I understand students are experienced writers. So what do you look for when in the audition or when selecting your students?
The first thing is we look for people who are basically already head writers but not showrunners. You can be overqualified for the program, but who either already have been head writers or on a TV series, or maybe if they are younger, just on the cusp of becoming that, and has been episode writer for a number of years and so on, and has now pitched their own show and so on. It looks right. Then they will have the level of experience that we need, because we need it. This is not about writing. This is not a show about or a course about writing. It's not a course about episode writing or even head writing. It is about everything else. It's about leadership in TV series, and that's something that few writers are educated to or prepared for. And I think, especially maybe speaking about writers, I know for myself, I mean, most writers seem to be introvert and love the safe space of their own imagination and the computer and so on. But if you have to lead a TV series, you have to get out there, and you have to lead people and lead and inspire other creatives, and those are skills that you can learn. But it's also about, I mean, we also talk about what we look for when we talk to the applicants. I also look for people with a lot of drive, that actually really wants to kick in the doors in the different national industries in Europe where showrunning is not common, but that people that want to work within this model and has the drive, where I believe that they can make a change in their own industry, not just for themselves and not just making their own show, but actually pushing the industry in a direction that I believe is fruitful, because obviously I believe in the showrunner model.
Yeah, and talking about that, the belief in the model, amongst writers, it's very popular for obvious reasons, but not everyone is a fan. Some people are indifferent, and some people even are opposed to it. And how do you think writers or advocates can go about taking away these objections? And do you address this at all on the course?
Absolutely. The indifference, I think, is naive. If people are indifferent to the showrunner model, then they're not looking at the realities, because it has been working so well for the Americans. It has been working so well for the Danish industry. Obviously, you can be opposed to it, and you can not want to work within it. I think that's absolutely fine, especially if you still make quality TV series. The opposition. But I think the opposition is twofold. It's some of it is from directors. We have a strong auteur tradition in Europe, and a lot of the time there are directors who feel they should be running the show, and I think that's completely valid. And it's for me, it's not something I'm opposed to. I think it has those. It's not easy for the reasons I mentioned earlier, necessarily on a long-running TV series, but on miniseries and a limited TV series, it might definitely be a thing. We only take writers to our course. It's writer based. The other opposition is by producers generally. That I think it's about risk, and it's about all that they feel it's very risky to trust the creative so much, that you give so much power away. I think there might also be sometimes a sense of vanity, that there are people who are enjoying the power so much, the creative power so much, while they, in my view, are not the real creatives. It can be nice to be.
Well, a producer might find it hard to hear.
Yeah, I know, and I understand it, and I know very. I mean, I'm not saying that producers, non-writing, non-directors, producers are not creative people, but I'm just saying that their level of creativity, in my view, when we're talking about doing TV series, is not as big as a writer or a director, and therefore to have the one vision, I think it is smart sometimes to step aside and leave the final creative decisions to the creative people. It doesn't mean I work very closely together with non-writing, non-director producers. Actually, I work in Denmark, the Danish model, created at DR, but it's still the way it works in the rest of the industry. It's not like the writers are showrunners like in the American system. It's not like we are untouchable emperors or anything like that. We tend to work in tandem with non-writing, non-directing producers, but we do it in a way where they understand the model, and my producer, he or she, will be responsible for everything that is the physical aspects of the TV series, all the many physical decisions that has to be made that are not in the end the visionary creative decisions. The visionary creative decisions, I will be responsible for those, but we will work so closely together because obviously there's, for instance, the budget. They take care of most of the budget. I will be very aware of the budget, and I will be responsible in the way that if I say I want a helicopter, they will say, I think, which is different from the older models in Europe, they will say, you want a helicopter? Okay, that's very expensive. Then how are you gonna save the money we need for the helicopter? You say is so important in the first episode. Well, then we will make 2 bottle episodes that will be very, very cheap, and then I will pitch that, and then, well, that might actually work, but that will make it like a decision, a creative decision that will work actually with the producers, but the writer, director, showrunner will have a lot of responsibility in that sense, but I mean, you cannot be just being a head writer on a TV series, it's maybe a little easier to be just the annoying artist that says, I want this, I want this, I want this, I don't care about budget, whatever. Like at least I know certain directors that are like that when they are working on a feature film. And sometimes, I mean, that's a great drive sometimes, but then there will be a producer panicking a bit and trying to cope with it. But if you're a showrunner within the showrunner model, you don't do that. You have to behave. You have to.
So it's very much about partnership,
yeah,
cooperation, and once again, trust.
Yes.
This might be because the European Showrunner program is specifically for writers, you say. But I'm wondering, does the program give more opportunity for co-productions, considering its international nature? It's called European Showrunner Program. Could you say something about that?
Yes and no. I think because I'm not saying that you can be showrunner in pairs. There are a few great showrunner pairs out there. For instance, Robert and Michelle King, who did The Good Wife and The Good Fight, who I recently moderated. People, we have 12 participants. We will meet one of them in a moment. Sanne. When we find them or they find us, I mean, we expect them to be showrunners afterwards and doing their own show, whether that will be a national production or international co-production, it's not really in our scope to do. We don't expect, unlike all other writers' courses in TV series, we don't expect our participants to work together afterwards. I would be surprised if they did, actually. But I'm not saying it's we don't decide if they do, but that's not the point of it. So in that sense, it's not about making co-production. And it, I mean, we try. I mean, the 12 participants tend to come from each their own different countries. We try actually only have one from each country every year. Sometimes we have 2 from the same country, but that's maximum because we really want to have an impact on the different national industries in Europe.
Well, before I'd like to ask Sanne and Pieter to join us, are there any questions from the audience? Yes, there's one. Can someone hand a mic to? Oh, there's more than one. Someone's. Oh. It's coming.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you tell how many writers you had in your writer's room and what the workflow was?
Yeah, it's. I tend to like rooms with three writers, the head writer and 2 writers. So on Borgen and Follow the Money, that was the way we did it. We tend to, with me, and I think many of the DR shows, but not all of them are made like that. We discuss the episodes together in the room, and everybody pitches idea. All the writers are in the room on each episode, and then after coming up with the storylines for 2 episodes, if I'm the head writer, I will send the episode writers home. They will do a treatment. They will come back. We will meet again. Also, the producers also in those meetings. We will discuss and give notes. And I expect also the other episode writer to give notes to the particular on the particular episode. And then we will do the same, with both episodes. Then they will go and write first draft and come back, do the same again, second draft, and from then on it's me. From then on, it's the head writer doing the 3rd, 4th, and 5th shooting draft. So that would be the workflow.
I saw another hand, yeah. I saw it. Oh, and then the gentleman in the back, please.
Would you, thank you for being here, by the way. Would you say that's a very common way of going at it in Denmark, or is it your way of running a show? Do you think it's kind of a standard in Europe? Because I think in America the room sizes are a lot bigger than that, right?
Absolutely. This is common in Denmark, and we have some. I've heard of a few bigger rooms, but I mean the showrunner model is very common in Denmark. I think basically everybody doing TV series is working sort of like this. Not with the same level of trust everywhere. I mean, because DI is quite exceptional. I think it can only be compared to American HBO or something like that, where they really trust their talent a lot and even give money for people developing things and so on. But I think the model is now the model that I used in Denmark. There was. Yeah. Go long.
Hi, Jeppe, a couple of questions about the course. First, I'm intrigued about why in Cologne and not in Copenhagen. And the second is, do you then focus on the dogmas? Some of the dogmas, are they kind of core to the frame of the course? Because I think there was another dogma that you didn't mention that had something to do with there had to be a very strong theme, which in each of the DR shows, right? That was a kind of one of the dogmas, that there had to be a kind of a second layer to whatever the adventure plot or whatever it was. So do you use those dogmas then in the course?
I do, but we have a lot of different experts that I'm not teaching. I'm not the main teacher, or maybe I am, but only with a very small degree. I'm the head of program, and I try to teach as much as I can outside of writing. But and I of course teach my model, but the Danish model is not necessarily the model that is thrown on upon the students or participants at the course only. They will have a lot of experts with a lot of different experiences showrunning in US, but mainly in Europe.
Is there a single vision for the course then?
There's the single vision of finding a showrunner model that will apply in Europe, but not one model for all of Europe, but it can be regional or national models. I think they will all look quite similar if they are to work, because the Danish model is quite similar to the American model, and I think if national models come out of this, spawn out of this somehow, that'll just be, I think, amazing. It doesn't have to be. I know there are people who have listened to me. As or nations in Europe should have showrunner models.
I'd like to take one more question, if there's one.
Yeah.
How many episodes do you write yourself? And is it the first episode to set the tone for the rest of the writers?
I write all the episodes, and I write none on the Follow the Money. Actually, I wanted to write the pilot. At some point I didn't have the time, so I worked closely together with one of my episode writers, and he wrote the first episode, and then I rewrote it many times. I think we ended up with like 12th draft or something on that one. But it's but with Borgen, Adam wrote the first episode, and then he rewrote the following episodes. I think nowadays I would insist on writing the first episode from the bottom up, because yeah, it makes sense. But for me, it doesn't have to be. It has to. I think there are no writers' room that work the same way, and I think you can find the rhythm that suits you as a showrunner. It should be the rhythm that suits you. If you want to write all episodes from start to bottom, it's not a writer's room. but I know writers who work with a writer's room where they mainly talk about the story with the other writers and try almost to prevent the other writers from writing too much, and then in episode 8 they are too stressed out and they will give out an episode and so on. If that works for them, that's fine. I think working with writer's room is for me integral in the showrunner model. If you have a showrunner that who is such a strong writer that he or she actually can write all the episodes by themselves, it doesn't really change the showrunner model for me. But I would expect, if it's a long-running show, there to be episode writers.
Well, with that question, I would like to invite Sanne and Pieter to join us for our panel. Give them a warm hand, please. Welcome, Sanne Nuyens and Pieter Bart Korhuis. Sanne, you started writing short films that won several awards on festivals. As a TV writer, you co-created the show Hotel Beau Sejour, which was distributed by Netflix worldwide as a Netflix original. And you also co-creator and writer and therefore showrunner of the show The 12, which won the award for Best Screenplay at Cannes Series. And we have a trailer of The 12, which I very much like to show to the audience. So.
In het millenniumproces wachten juryleden een zeer zware taak. Frie Palmers wordt beschuldigd van 2 moorden. Haar beste vriendin Brechtje Vindevogel 18 jaar geleden en haar dochtertje Roos.
Ik weet dat jij je dochter daar straks de keel hebt proberen over te snijden. Ik ga je pakken. En dan zorg ik ervoor dat jij voor jaren een bakking gaat.
domme dingen gedaan. Ik heb in mijn scheiding, ik weet dat wel, tuurlijk wel. Maar de politie heeft nooit niet verder gekeken dan dat. Ze hebben alles gebruikt om mij vast te steken, alles.
Zit hij toch in die jury?
Ik kan over elk jurylid een verhaal vertellen.
Holly Keusters.
Mensen moeten gestraft worden binnen het rechtssysteem. Als iedereen zijn eigen strafmaat zou bepalen, zou het proper zijn.
Daphine, heeft u dat nog nooit eens gedaan?
Jeez.
Jörn.
Bij mijn apen is het heel simpel. Als ze zich afwijkend gedragen of als we de hiërarchie niet respecteren, dan gaat de groep naar de kloten. Onvermijdelijk.
Vree, wat is dat?
Ik zeg alleen maar dat de politie dat niet heeft onderzocht.
Is het waar dat het onderzoek dat jij 16 jaar lang gevoerd hebt nooit werd weerlegd?
Ja.
Gelooft jij dat Free Palmers de moord op Brechtje Vindevogel heeft gepleegd?
Wat is dat hier voor flauwekul?
Ik wil graag dat de griffier noteert dat de procureur hier de getuige de mond probeert te snoeren.
Nee, ik zit hier niet te liegen.
Jij wilde Free Palmers in de gevangenis. En daar had jij alles voor over.
Free, jij kon van niemand niks meer verdragen. Je hebt zelf gezegd dat als iemand te dik bij Roos zou komen, dat je serieus zou verweren.
Dat is niet waar. Nee, dat is niet waar.
Alles! Kom aan! Ik hoef deze insinuaties van die klootzak niet te pikken. Ik denk niet dat ik de juiste mens ben om te oordelen over iemand anders.
Gripping courtroom drama. And then with us as well is Pieter Bart Korhuis. You started working in documentaries and non-scripted, moved on to television writing. You created Penosa, the hit show that was remade in several countries. You wrote Het Jaar van Fortuin, and you created...
Together with Nathan Vecht.
Co-created, co-wrote. And you created, were showrunner for the comedy series Dirty Lines. And warm welcome to both of you. Sanne, yes, please, one hand. Sanne, I'd like to ask you, because as Jeppe said, you're an alumna of the European Showrunner Program.
Yes.
How did you become a showrunner? And I understand you were a showrunner before you joined the program. Mm-hmm. And how did you decide to train some more?
Well, I started out as a writer for the first season of Beau Sejour, and we started doing like little stuff in the production, like we were involved in casting, and we were involved in editing, and also there was one shooting day that the directors couldn't do, so Bert, my co-writer, and we directed the one day. So there were like small things, and we really liked it. So for when we were creating the 12, which was our next show, we told the producer that was something that we would like to do, and the producer said yes. So he let us be the showrunner, but
a producer who trusted you.
Yes. But being the showrunner wasn't. We took all of the creative decisions, but we were not really responsible for the budget, and that was really something that was something like on the credits I think there's just that I'm the creator of the show, but there's not showrunner or executive producer at all. So that's why I wanted to join the course, because that was something that producers always told me, like, you're not the showrunner because you're not responsible for the budget. And so then the showrunning course came along, and that was, I remember in the application or in the interview, something that we talked about. Like, I did take a lot of creative decisions already. I was involved in finding the directors and being in the editing room and all of that, but I couldn't get the credit, and I wanted to know, what is it that I'm not doing? And while sitting in the course, they learned me, like, this is what you do as a showrunner if you want to be involved in the budgets. And it's sitting next to the line producer and being in a team with the producer, and it's not like you are the line producer. And that was something I didn't really know. So now in my negotiations with the producers, I stand stronger. I got, you know, I know what I want to do, I know what I can do, and I know what I can ask.
And Sanne, Jeppe already told us that the program is not about writing, but
Not at all, no.
what you learned on the program, did it affect or influence your writing at all?
Of course, when you are the showrunner, you have the budgets in mind. So it is something that I do as a writer. I take a look at the locations. I see that there's not, you know, just one scene at that location. Or when we start casting, I know we cannot take all of the A-list actors because they're too expensive and stuff like that. So in the writing itself, I think, yeah, I always think as a little bit as a producer, which is not as good maybe all the time, but yeah, it is something.
Yeah, but it's understandable. Yeah. And talking about what influences your writing, Pieter, you started out in documentary making and non-scripted.
Yeah, well, more reality TV.
Reality
so
TV.
I wouldn't call it documentary.
No, but because I understand that you studied in Mexico City, the film school there.
Yeah,
and
I did a year of documentary studies over there. Yeah.
And I'm wondering that those experiences, did those affect your drama writing at all?
Well, as a writer, yeah, maybe, because I did a lot of reality series about the police, about hospitals. And the good thing about that is that everywhere where there's a sign, no entrance, you can enter. And you know how many screenwriters or directors how many normal people who are not doctors can say they have seen a heart beating. So you get to see a lot of how society works. And so yeah, that makes you grow as a person, and that makes you a better writer. But I think in those first 5 years, I did so many hours of television doing reality, and it's just the same. It's storytelling. So I spent so many hours in the editing room or on set, and then it's a very small set. But you're still, you know, the story is developing in front of you, but it's still storytelling. So, and actually, when I worked with Mike Rijsman, who was a documentary director and editor, and when we started writing together, for the first time he realized, oh, the difference is very, very little. And now he is directing documentary with a different sense, because it's just, you know, working through conflict, achieving something. Yeah, that's what story is.
And for the show you created, Dirty Lines, you've written it, you've been showrunner. Can you share your experience, the show running experience, and is there a particular Dutch model, would you say?
Well, at this point, I think the way we did Dirty Lines comes close to the Danish model. I wanted to be the most important creative voice in the room, because it's not, and that's always the sort of where people are mistaken. It's not about a conflict of power or something. No, it is where in Holland it used to be that as a screenwriter, your work stops as soon as the script goes to the set. And, you know, they might come back and they say, oh, something is not working, or an actor is sick, so can you rewrite? And then you're already busy doing your other screen. So you have to do that during the night. And in the worst possible way, the director is doing that scene by himself during the night. So you are, being a showrunner means you are paid to be there from the first idea until the very last sound design or digital design, and you're involved. So you're a very close ally to every director, to every writer. So, and that makes it different than if you are directing and leading the show, because most directors were not there in the room. They weren't there when every idea was weighed on a silver platter. So that's Dirty Lines was made effectively in that model. And as you said, being in charge of the budget doesn't mean, you know, my ass is on the line if I go over budget. No, but a line producer will talk to me and says, you want that? Like I didn't want a helicopter in Dirty Lines, but I wanted a submarine. And Frankie Ribbons wrote the most wonderful scene about, because of the, well, for the people who've seen Dirty Lines, you know, the sex lines are such a success that the whole of the network, the telephone network in the Rotterdam area is full. And then when a submarine catches fire, who's in the docks, they cannot call the fire brigade. And that is historic, because, and so he wrote this terrific shot with the submarine, and it was there maybe that shot until the very last final shooting script. And then looking at the budget, I had to make the call. Okay, the submarine goes, but I can get the Ferrari I can run the Ferrari into the canal. So so those are, and it's important because
it's give and take.
Yeah.
Submarine on fire. That sounds expensive.
But you shouldn't. You know, when you're writing, you have to be as free and creative as you can possibly can. And now a lot of things are possible with digital effects. So 10 years ago, I would never have written a scene with a Ferrari going into the canal. Never. Now you can dream a little bit bigger. Yeah.
And in America, the showrunner model is a very clear hierarchy to the top, which is the showrunner position. Would any of you say that is what most writers should aspire to? And I guess a second question in that question is everyone suitable to be a showrunner? Whoever wants to take it.
Not at all. I mean, in the course that we did, we started out with 12 people, and I think there were 2 at the end of the course that said they don't want to be a showrunner because it's so much responsibility. And it's also a way of figuring out what you want as a writer, I think.
I completely agree, and I was allowed to quote Thies van Maal on it. After doing the course, he realized he was happy being the head writer and being in charge of all that, but he actually did not want to take all the many fights that a showrunner has to take also. And I completely understand that and respect that just as much, and I think getting to that point through the course is also beneficial, and it's also a reason to be there. And I mean, I remember watching a masterclass by Bruce Miller, who did The Handmaid's Tale just when it was the biggest show on the planet, and I expected, you know, to see the emperor come into the room. He was the hottest writer, the hottest showrunner in the world. And then in came a guy who looked so completely tired and almost broken. And when asked about the job, he said, it's the worst job in the world, but it's what I want to do, and I have to do it. And I love to do the show, so I have to do that work. But he looked like Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders. And if you're not into that, then don't be a showrunner. And it makes sense that you will only know it after you stepped into it. If you really want that kind of life or non-life.
When it comes to the system or the model, we've already heard that it functions pretty well in Denmark. Sanne and Pieter, do you think that young writers in Belgium and the Netherlands are sufficiently prepared for series writing and therefore also for the role as showrunner?
At this point, no. I don't think that there is that series writing is educated in the right way. And especially I think that one of the things for showrunning, people should have spent also hours on set, I think, but especially in the editing room. And I think especially editing makes you a better makes you a better writer. So, and well, of course, you can always say, "Hi, in my time it was better" or something. The Film Academy wasn't the best academy in the world when I was at school, but at least you could have 2 classes. I was a director and an editor, so I had a wide range of getting to know the trade. And now, when screenwriters are just writing, I think, and I don't know if you agree, but I think for showrunning, you need to have spent also a lot of, because you need to be the best person to communicate with the editor and the directors. You have to know something about editing. Yeah.
Well, I agree. I think being there and working on a show, preferably underneath a showrunner, is the absolutely best way to become a showrunner yourself later on. And I think I absolutely agree that being in the writers' room is crucial. I always, when I was an episode writer, I made sure that I was available when there were screenings in the editing room. And I learned so much there, and I cannot edit myself at all. And I always insist on my episode writers going to the editing room. But I mean, some of them does not feel obliged, and if they resist it, I'm not gonna push them into the room. But honestly, I don't understand why they don't want to be there. Even I mean, it hurts the first time you see a first cut of anything. It's so horrible and it's so frightening. And I saw I think I can out her, my good friend Maja Juel Larsen, who's now a showrunner in Denmark, who did the show called Cry Wolf. When she saw her first episode on Borgen in the 3rd season, she came aboard as an episode writer, and she was so scared and so horrified by what she had just witnessed. She felt, this is never going to work. It's going to crush my career. It's going to ruin Borgen. And it turned out to be a great episode. But you have to learn that to be in the editor's room, as you have to learn how to speak to directors, how to speak to everybody else creatively on the show.
I think in Belgium there is one film school that has pretty good series writing education, but there's no showrunners course at all. So I think the only one I know of is in Cologne.
So would that be something that film schools, kunstacademies could be paying attention to facilitate the Belgium and the Dutch series market?
Yes,
industry?
and from the writer's point of view, so in Belgium, the first showrunners were really more like producers or directors, but never writers, or they were writer-producers who stepped into that. And I think it's really good that in Cologne they only take writers in, so that the writers can learn more and get into the stream. I think in Belgium, me and my co-writer from the 12 and Beau Sejour are the first ones who come from the writing job, and the other ones that were already there were writer-producers, or usually writer-producers. Yes.
But I mean, it is controversial at the moment at the Danish Film School. They are trying to set up a small showrunner course in a smaller scale than what we do, but and I know already that it's already causing trouble for them. They can't call it showrunner, they can call it, I think, TV series leadership, and it's a big discussion whether directors can apply or not apply, and what is the angle and so on. And it's already quite messy. I'm trying to
and why can't they call it showrunner course? Do you know?
Long story. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but
it's just a name. But
yeah.
And you, when you're young and you're in the film academy, you don't know where you end up. I started as a director, and screenwriting became my most important job. Whereas I was, how do you call it? I was deleted from the screenwriting classes because of lack of talent. So you never know where you end up. Yeah. So I would say no. Open it up for directors. Open it up for writers as well, and you never know how a career develops. Yeah.
Well, talking about that career development and the showrunner position as the top job, how do you deal with success?
You're the most successful.
I think at DI it actually was quite easy in the sense that still after doing Borgen, when I had the chance to do my own show, Follow the Money, I was still doing a show for Denmark. So it wasn't, I mean, of course there was success in Denmark, but at least the international success, I didn't have to worry too much about that because I was still writing a show primarily for Denmark because it's made for the Danish audiences. I think things have now changed a little bit. DR has realized they can actually make some money on the shows. But at that time, it was just supposed to be Sunday night, 8 o'clock, financed by public money. Whatever money comes in afterwards, it's really not relevant. It's about doing a quality show for the Danish audience. I think that was a beautiful way of doing it at DR. So in that way, you were sort of like shaded protected against getting, too nervous from doing suddenly now the next show. It might also be on BBC4 and whatever, and you could actually. Then I wouldn't have been able to write, I think, but yeah, that's my experience.
And for me, it's a great luxury, of course, to have success. But the most important thing for me is it's all about trust. And if you've had a couple of hits, then you're trusted a little bit more. You're still, the debate about because a screenplay is still not a finished product. So you can have a lot of debate with producers, with directors, and with the actors. So that doesn't change. But if I say, I think it's going to work, then people trust me a little bit more, and that helps.
I can imagine.
It gives you the chance to make more of the things you want to make. Yeah. So that's what's good about it.
Absolutely, the way that you can actually get to pitch to the right people and the people with power enough to trust you, that's very relevant. Yeah.
Could you share, Sanne and Pieter, what you're working on at the moment?
I have nothing that is already greenlit. So I have a couple of pilots for a crime show. Robert, can I say something about it? Yes. Okay. I'm doing a crime show for the public broadcaster that takes place at the Justice Department in Curaçao. So writing a couple of episodes of that series. I'm a feature series, and it's a lot of juggling and hoping that something gets greenlit. Yeah.
I'm writing for SBS, which is a Flemish channel, and Streams, which is a Belgian streamer, together with it's for two Dutch directors. Some of you may know them. It's Sabine Lubbe-Bakker and Niels van Koevoorde. He's also a DOP. They did a really beautiful documentary, Ne me quitte pas, about two drunks in Wallonia, and they did Kom hier dat ik u kus, which is a book adaptation of a Flemish book, and now they're making their first series in Belgium. And it's called 10 Little Monks, and it's about 10 Trappist monks in a Belgian convent, and they win best beer in the world, which really happened to a Belgian beer label. And they let capitalism in, and they start making bad decisions, and they start digging their own grave. And it's like every episode, one of the monks falls off. So. Like in the song, in the children's song, yeah.
And now you've shared your projects. What advice would you have for young series writers who may not or may have aspirations to be a showrunner?
What advice? So I'm in contact with the Danish writer Nikolaj Gjervig, who is the creator of The Bridge, and he commented on a pilot that I wrote, and with every scene it's too generic. It's too generic. That's something that I think like if you make things that we've seen it before, so try to make things that we haven't seen before. That would be my advice.
Okay, but I've always, or as writers, we seem to be needing to balance. It needs to be original, but not too out there, not too original, so that
I think the good thing of the difference between how it is done in Denmark and in the Netherlands is over here in the Netherlands we need a little bit of safety. We know that works, so let's do it that way. And over there, no, that worked already, so now can you give us something new?
That's very interesting. Yeah. So not necessarily bravery, but, well, a sense of bravery. This is done before, just push it a bit further.
And saying, trust me, this is original. Something like, but this is a feature film, Triangle of Sadness. I very much doubt that it could have ever been made in the Netherlands, ever.
Interesting. Sanne?
I think it's important when you're writing to ask the producer or the director to be on set as a writer. You learn a lot from that. Being there, seeing the way the cameraman, chooses the shots, being next to the director, looking at the way he handles things, and then, if it's possible, going into the editing room, being there a couple of days per episode, and learning from the practical things.
Those are great tips. Yes.
And I would say try to get on board on a show where that's actually led by a showrunner, because knowing the system, I would say from the bottom, is such a great help later.
So then it becomes more like the US model in that sense, that you can work your way up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, something we haven't talked about: create an opportunity within the budget. So this is a reach for the broadcasters. Have showrunning, make it a part of the budget. Because if there's no money to be involved until the last day of shooting or the last day of editing, then how are you going to be a showrunner? Yeah. There is a need for showrunning, but it needs to come out of the budget.
Yeah.
And you're going to save money because of it.
Amen.
I'd like to open it up. Any questions to our panel members? Yes, do we have...
How is it going to save money, having a showrunner?
Because you have a writer on board who can make creative decisions in an early stage instead of when it's already gone to hell. No, in an early stage you can say, oh, we see something is going wrong with the budget. Can you make cuts? Where do we make the cuts? So that's how you're going to save money. Yeah.
Can each of you talk a little bit about how you assembled your writers' rooms? So, because I can imagine these people are going to be your soulmates, right? And share your vision of what the story is and the world is going to be. Or maybe you want people who add with their strengths to your weaknesses, or have particular visions of the world that you don't share. Can you talk about how you approach that in your shows?
Should I start? It's a complex question, but yes, I prefer to have people who complement my strengths, and I've also learned that having people that are basically on the same level as I am as a writer. I mean, when I started out doing Follow the Money, I hired 2 people, brilliant screenwriters who were also very close friends of mine, and we had always wanted to work together. And I thought, wow, now I'm the boss, so I hire them, because then we can actually realize that idea of working together. And that turned out to be very, very difficult, to be the boss of your 2 close friends that are also basically at least considering themselves, but I do too, as on the exact same level as you are. That was very hard, and that was a hard learning curve for all of us, not least me, but also for them actually. And then in the end, when they, after 1-2 seasons, they dropped out and got each their own shows, and then I rehired the room on the 3rd season, and I realized I had to do what Adam did on Borgen, and hired 2 young, hungry writers that really wanted to prove themselves, and that turned out very well and much easier for me, because by then I could be, you know, the old seasoned writer that said this direction, this direction, this direction, and just enjoy seeing them, you know, try to deliver the best they could, and that worked out much better. But they were also, I mean, they were different from me in each their own way. The 3rd season is a lot about drugs, and one of my writers had a lot of previous experience with drugs, and he used to be an addict. It's not a secret. And the other was a female writer. I really wanted a female writer in the room, and she had also some a great comedy talent that I thought we could explore, even though the season is quite serious. Then just having her tone of voice in there once in a while was very enjoyable.
Got some questions in the back. Is there a mic? If maybe you want to hurl it upwards.
For me, it's well. Most of the time when I write, I have Gustavo Santaolalla. I never know how to pronounce his name. Santaolalla. So that's the music that I write. No, but music is, especially for a series like Dirty Lines, I create immense lists of songs from the 80s and try to make that a part of the episode. Yeah. So, but on the whole, no, I'm not really a musical writer. No.
I think it's very personal for me. Not at all. I like silence when I write, total silence. But for me, the editor has always been someone who's really involved in, you know, trying to get the tone. And I've always edited with someone who is really into soundtracks. So he was always suggesting things, and then we were in the editing room finding out what the best tone would be and what we took as temporary music. But I've always worked with temp first, and then afterwards the music has been made. So for me, it was never part of the writing process or something. But I guess there are some writers who actually do that.
I do like to put songs in the episode, because then I can spend a couple of hours looking for the right song, and then I don't have to write for a couple of hours, which is always very, very nice.
One more question for the gentleman in the back.
Will showrunner be a function on the credits list, or is it already?
I mean, for me, it absolutely doesn't have to. I think there was one person in Denmark who was credited showrunner at some point, but she was a producer, non-writing, non-directing producer. She just negotiated that, and at that point, the people she negotiated with really didn't care. So she got the title. I think she's a wonderful producer, but I'm not sure it made a lot of sense that she was credited showrunner. I'm not one of those who believe that it has to be a credit.
But do you have the credit created by
yes.
your series?
Yeah. Yes.
Which is practically
exactly, and that's what they do in the US generally. The showrunner is normally the person that has the created by credit.
Yeah, in the States it's usually executive producer when
well.
you are a showrunner, and we've been talking about this at the course as well. It's very, very hard in Belgium to get the executive credit as a showrunner, because for years and years and years, the producers have had that credit. And if you ask it as a writer, it's very hard in the negotiations. While at the course, everyone is saying you have to get that credit. And for me, it seems like showrunner is the showrunner credit, which doesn't exist in the States, is something that a producer in Europe will give you faster than the executive producer credit. So I don't know if it's such a bad thing that it would come upon the credits because it's better than just a created by. You do have a recognition of the function. So I think I would be open to it.
Time's up, I'm afraid. So thank you very much to our panel members, Jeppe Gjervig Gram, Pieter Bart Korhuis, Sanne Nuyens, and a warm applause for you as well as an audience. Thank you.